Does video game violence correlate into real-world violence? That's the question. And no doubt, if you've been watching the news, if you've been listening to the radio, reading any type of stories over the course of the last few days, no doubt you've probably seen a number of sources now proclaim that video game violence is partly to blame for the situation that we have in Connecticut. It's partly to blame for the culture of violence that we have today. So I wanted to directly hit this head on. Let's take a look at what is being said out there. Senator Joe Lieberman on Fox News Sunday, he said this: "The violence in the entertainment culture, particularly with the extraordinary realism to video games and movies now, does cause vulnerable men particularly to be violent." He doesn't say probably does. He doesn't say it might. He says that it does. He actually just gave a speech in front of Congress pretty much saying the same exact quote. David Axelrod, the president's buddy, he was the campaign manager, he tweeted out the other day after he watched a NFL game, an ad for shoot 'em up video games. All for curbing weapons of war, but shouldn't we also quit marketing murder as a game? Murder as a game. The Sun, front page, big bold letters, Killers Call of Duty Obsession. So it's headlines like this, just one right after another. Colorado's governor got on TV. Joe Scarborough on MSNBC the other day was talking about mind-numbing violent video games that causes kids to be desensitized to violence. So all these people are reaching millions of listeners' ears. They're reaching your parents probably if you're younger. They're reaching a lot of people. So do these people even know what they're talking about? Is there any correlation whatsoever between video game violence and real-world violence? I wanted to dig a little bit deeper to figure out if these people were just, throwing stuff at the wall hoping something would stick, or if there was a serious problem. Because if there is, we've got a big issue on our hands, because the Pew Research Center reported in 2008 97% of young people between the ages of 12 and 17 played some type of video games, and 2/3 of those were violent. So that means if there is a correlation between violent video games and real-world violence, that we've got a lot of ticking time bombs out there. So this is something to be concerned about if it's true. So let's look at the research. A comprehensive report of targeted school violence commissioned by the U.S. Secret Service and the Department of Education, because they're trying to profile people who they need to keep an eye on. Their report found and cautioned that no particular behavior, including interest in violence, could be used to produce a profile of a killer. Federal crime statistics, these are numbers from the government. They say serious violent crimes among young people have decreased ever since 1996, even though video game sales have skyrocketed. That's 2 studies. Chris Ferguson, Department Chair of Psychology and Communications at Texas A&M University, he's conducted several studies into violence and its effect on the youth, and he found video games just not a common factor among mass homicidal perpetrators. He said some of the mass murders have been players, some of them haven't. So where is all this coming from? Where are these people getting their information? And, they always say, well, the studies show that there's a link between violent video games and aggression. Well, Chris Ferguson, the Department Chair of Psychology, he actually kind of addresses this. He says many studies on the issue of media violence rely on measures to assess aggression that don't correlate with real-world violence, meaning that you don't shoot somebody in game and then go out and shoot somebody in the real world. He said, more importantly, many are observational approaches that don't prove cause and effect. So the way they approach these studies is they take you, they put you in a controlled environment, they've got you hooked up to blood pressure sensors, heart rate monitors, all that, and they ask you to play a video game. And so some of the people who play the violent video games, they may have an increase in heart rate, or they may have an increase in blood pressure. And I say, yeah, duh. Because how many times have you played a game and you've been getting beat, you're not doing so well, or you can't beat that level, and you get a little frustrated, you get a little flustered? Everybody has had that. But does it only happen with video games? No. I get flustered sometimes if I go to McDonald's and I get my order wrong. Or a couple of months ago, I've got a Murray lawnmower that I was having problems with the battery because I had corrosive battery terminals. So I was out there, I was trying to get the terminals off, I was going to replace them, and I was sitting there fidgeting around, dropping stuff, getting angry. Anybody who would have been monitoring me would have seen aggression. They would have seen my blood pressure rise. They would have seen my heart rate increase. But should we ban battery terminals that are corrosive? I mean, no, that doesn't make any sense. Anything that you can interact with, there's a possibility that it may not go according to plan as you interact with it, and that you could get aggressive. But all of these studies that even show the aggressive behavior, even they say that it was all very short term and that it had no long-term effects. There's no study that shows a direct correlation between video game violence and real-world violence. But for some, that's still not going to be enough. There should be some number somewhere. We're just not, studying the right people, or we're not watching them long enough until they go kill somebody. So let's take a common sense approach. Countries who sell more video games should, if video game violence leads to violence, should have more violence, right? Let's look at one more piece of information. The Washington Post posted up a chart of the 10 countries that spend the most per capita on video games, and they charted it out with gun-related murders. And what you see if you look at this chart, Netherlands, South Korea, France, Canada, Australia, United Kingdom, Japan, Germany, they all spend more per capita than the United States. Yet if you look at it, the United States is off the charts when it comes to gun-related murders. This chart totally blows that out of the water. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Now, some people will say, well, not all countries have the same gun laws. Not all countries have the same culture. And yes, that's true, but there should be some sort of correlation if you map it out on a chart between video game violence, and it's just not there. It's just not there. I completely understand and encourage questioning everything, trying to get to the bottom of these senseless acts of violence. But there's so many different variables. You can look at the economic status. People who are lower income, they have lower education, they have higher crime rates in those areas. You can look at mental health institutions. In 1957, we had 600,000 people locked up in the United States in mental health hospitals. Most of those hospitals have been shut down, the funding taken away. Today, even though the population has risen, there's less than 40,000 people inside any type of mental institution. So what they've done is they've let all the crazies out on the road, and they've given them a pill, and, well, they hope you take it. They hope you're okay. So we've got a mental health issue. We've got economic issues in this country. We've got a gun control law. A lot of people have been bringing up gun control. Well, you shouldn't be able to go get a gun without an in-depth background check. That's just my personal opinion. In most states, you do have to get a background check in order to have a gun. But you go to a gun show, there's a lot of loopholes where you don't. So those need to be looked at. Those need to be fixed. Or if you want to look at this on a case-by-case study and you want to look at this particular crime, there were so many things that went wrong. One, this kid obviously had serious mental issues, and his mother apparently had mental issues as well, because she's taken her mentally unstable child to a gun range. The aunt of the killer is saying that the mom was a doomsday prepper. So maybe we should look at National Geographic show Doomsday Preppers, because she was hoarding food and water, guns and ammunition. She left her guns, her legal guns, out with her mentally unstable child where they could be stolen, where they could be used in this. There are so many things that went wrong here. I completely understand throwing everything at the wall, questioning everything to try to get to the bottom of this senseless violence that seems to have taken over our country and our culture. But we have to stay sensible. You can't let emotions run away and lose sight of science and research. Video games are no more to blame for violence than comic books in the 50s or grim fairy tales. Reading a book at the library. Sometimes it's hard to make sense of senseless crimes, and no matter what we find out about the Connecticut tragedy, it'll never make sense because there is no sense to be made of it. There is no explanation in the world for why somebody would do this. And I understand people getting upset, getting angry, but using video games as a scapegoat, the reason why I wanted to do this was because I know a lot of parents probably worry for their kids. And if you're worried for your kids, hug them. Be a good parent. Pay attention to what they're playing. If it's an M-rated game, kids can't go buy a video game unless they get the money from somewhere. Pay attention to your kids. You know, there's a lot of issues that need to be addressed and need to be looked at. And I totally understand the concerns. But when you've got people going on TV proclaiming to be experts without giving any data, without giving any research, they're no more experts than me or you. As always, if you want to read the sources where I just got this information from, I'll leave links in the description box, and you'll notice that they're not Joe Schmo WordPress blogs. These are Harvard institution. These are government studies, and you know, you can go check them out and research it for yourself. But I will leave you with one more note. Joe Scarborough the other day got on MSNBC, and he was talking about mind-numbing violent video games. And he was talking about how violent video games are desensitizing everybody who plays them. But let me ask you a question. What's more desensitizing? This or seeing images like this on the nightly news of any given night? I'll leave that one up to you. Be sure you subscribe for more if you want the latest news and in-depth information on video games and technology. Be sure to tune in to VGNVideoGamesAndNews.com. Also, be sure you subscribe to this channel. I'll be doing more videos sort of like this. We're going to be looking at a lot of different things where, you know, we're just going to try to get to the bottom of this and look at science and research to try to determine what's factual and what's not. Question everything, my friends. Stay safe out there. Take care. That does it for me, The Red Dragon. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.